Hello, in this module we'll be covering a very interesting topic called stakeholder management. So there is when does a project fail? Do the project fail at the beginning or during execution or at the end? Very often we are tempted to say that the project failed at the end, but then the reality is that the project's fate is decided at the beginning of the project itself. Either we get into a project which doesn't have a business case, or we adopt a wrong strategy for a particular type of project, in the sense the customer himself doesn't know the requirements very clearly. For such projects we sign fixed price contract, then we are in trouble. Maybe the ideal contract type should be time and material. So, or we start a project which doesn't have a business case, or the most important thing, we may miss out some of the critical stakeholders of the project and we fail to manage them. There is a general saying like, if we can, as a project manager, if you can make the stakeholders happy at the beginning of the project and during execution and till the end of the project, then you are a successful project manager. Now let us see the definition of a stakeholder as per PMBOK. Anybody who is affected positively or negatively by doing a project or by not doing a project is a stakeholder. Anybody who is affected positively or negatively by doing a project or by not doing it is a stakeholder. Now let us take the case of a flyover construction project. Now who all could be the stakeholders? Maybe the local citizens who may be affected positively or negatively, the government agencies, the vehicle owners, the road transport authority, the workers, the project manager, the contracting company, the government agencies, anybody who is affected. If the flyover is done on time, okay, then the local citizens are affected positively. But if the flyover is getting delayed, then the local citizens are getting affected negatively. So anybody who is affected positively or negatively by doing a project or by not doing it is a stakeholder. So with this as the definition in mind, it will be fruitful if you can come out with the stakeholders for the project. And it's quite likely that we may not miss out some of the high power, high interest stakeholders. Typically, who all could be the stakeholders? Maybe the owners of the project, the customers, the suppliers, the community, the staff, the company which is executing that project. So all these could be examples of stakeholders. Now, scope for professional project management. So within the gamut of professional project management, as a project manager we may have to deal with all these direct stakeholders or internal stakeholders like the sponsor, the other project managers within the organization, the finance manager, the engineering manager, the technical support teams, the customer, legal, test manager, the government agencies, the HR, suppliers and quality manager. Please understand that upon completion of this project, there may be a 360-degree appraisal, 360-degree feedback, where the feedback about your performance is collected from all the stakeholders, and if all of them say that you're good, then you become good, otherwise you become bad. At the same time, when their performance appraisal is done, your feedback is not collected. So it is not a level playground, it is a slightly skewed system. So you become successful. See, none of these guys are reporting to you directly. At the same time, you're supposed to get things done through them, and you become a great project manager if you can make all these people delighted throughout the life cycle of the project. And this is not a complete list of stakeholders. Maybe let's say for a high-rise building, even a terrorist group could be should be considered as a stakeholder. Otherwise you will not have security systems built into the structure when it is completed. Even your competitors could be stakeholders, even your family members could be stakeholders. Now, while identifying the stakeholders, we very often we have access to the project charter document we have the procurement document to refer back to, then enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. So all these things will give us clues while identifying the stakeholder, and then we come out with the stakeholder register and a stakeholder management strategy based on their interest levels and authority levels to influence our project. At this stage, it is very critical to understand the organizational structures of your suppliers, customers, your own organization, because if your own organization falls into a functional organization, then the functional manager will be a high power, high interest stakeholder. But if it is a projectized organization, then the functional manager could be a high interest, low power stakeholder. Similarly, in a projectized organization, the project manager could be a high power, high interest stakeholder, and the functional manager could be a high interest, low power. In a matrix, again it depends. So it is very important to understand the organizational structures of your stakeholders before identifying who is having higher power and who is having lesser power, and who is having high interest and who else is having lower interest in your project. So we are not getting into a detailed discussion of the organizational structures here, because we have another module which explains these organizational structures and the power equations very elaborately. Now this diagram will help us to classify the stakeholders into 4 different groups. So here we have stakeholders who have a lot of interest in your project and who have a lot of power to influence your project. So we call it high power, high interest category. And here we have stakeholders who have a lot of power at the same time who have low interest in your project. Keep them satisfied. And here we have a lot of stakeholders who have high interest in your project, but they are not very powerful. Keep them informed. And here we have a lot of stakeholders who have low power and low interest. Maybe for the time being we can ignore them. So this diagram will help us to categorize or segment our stakeholders into these 4 different groups, and then develop appropriate strategies to deal with them. And once we know the that 4 segments of our stakeholders, then it is very easy to map them into this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Most probably those high power, high interest stakeholders could be operating at the esteem needs level here, and maybe the high interest, low power stakeholder may be operating at this level. So what can motivate, what you should be talking at this level is we should be talking about the business case of the project, the payback period, the net present value, the opportunity cost, so those kind of thing, and the strategic management, project portfolio management. So that will be of interest to this class, whereas your high interest, low power stakeholders may be operating at this level, and what interests them could be the next increment and all, or they may fall into these segments as well. So it's a very powerful tool. First you come out with a stakeholder register, then based on that 4 segment, like high power, high interest, high power, low interest kind of segmentation, you can classify them into different groups. At that time we should look at the organizational structures as well. Then we can map our stakeholders onto the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and come up with appropriate strategies to deal with them. I hope this module was informative for you. Thank you very much.